I'm Mr. Fenstermacher, man of the sea. If you've never known a dog called Mister, you haven't met me.
It's rainy and stormy at the real beach today.
Inside, Mr. Fenstermacher and I are warm and dry, and there's just enough sun peeking from behind the clouds that we can see well, and we'll make a pretend beach. The blanket is blue, like the ocean. There's some flowers on it, so we'll pretend that's seaweed. And we'll take this towel that looks a little bit like sand, and we'll build a pretend sand castle. Now, when Mr. Fenstermacher's boys and girls make sand castles, he's just delighted because he thinks he's a royal doll. And a sand castle is often just the right size. We'll take things from around the house and we'll put our sand castle that's not really made of sand together. Just like a real sand castle, sometimes structures are tippy. Oh, let's put a margarine tub turret there. What do you think, Mr. Fenstermacher? Come out from behind and sit and enjoy your sand castle. And he did. But you know what happens to sand castles? A couple of things. Sometimes the water comes up and washes it away, and sometimes people, whether they're grown-ups or children, like to smash a sand castle. Just take their feet and kick it, or take their hands and knock it over. And that's what happened in this story. The boys and girls knocked over their sandcastle, and Mr. Fenstermacher got buried. What do you think is going to happen? For many, many days, Mr. Fenstermacher lay partially buried in the cool, wet sand. One of his eyes was uncovered, so he could look up at the moon, and that was great comfort to him. As long as the moon was there. It was a gibbous moon. That means halfway between full moon and half moon. It was a gibbous moon when he was first buried, but it kept disappearing. Getting smaller and smaller. That's really my hand, isn't it? It's not really the moon disappearing. Can we pretend? And smaller. And smaller. And smaller. The night sky was getting darker. What was going to happen to Mr. Fenstermacher? Until only the last slice of moon was showing, and that's when things changed. This is the part of the story where Fane the fiddler crab becomes Mr. Fenstermacher's best friend. Fane the fiddler crab was sidling along in the sand, and crabs just kind of pushed the sand this way and that, and as he dug and dug and dug, he found Mr. Fenstermacher's arm, and he pulled him to safety. Right out in the open where his kids could see him. Now there was a slight problem because Mr. Fenstermacher didn't speak crab and Fane the fiddler crab didn't speak doll, but they could still communicate. And there was Mr. Fenstermacher when a little child came along and picked him up and said, "Mr. Fenstermacher, we've missed you." So the children took him and they lay him out in the sun where he could dry, and then they would brush the sand off and he'd be as good as new. That's better than an old doll being tossed in the washer or dryer. And that was the beginning of the end of his sandcastle story, and the beginning of his next adventure.
Gather round his rocking chair, dear children, and hear more tales of Mr. Fenstermacher and his friends at the beach.